The two biggest phones that I think are going to make a big impact in 2021 are the OnePlus 9 Pro and the Xiaomi Mi 11 Ultra. Let's first of all go through the stats on these phones. Then we can look at what separates them, and then we can decide which ones we think are better. Personally, I've made my mind up, but I want to see what you think as well. Both phones feature the Snapdragon 888 latest Qualcomm processor, so fantastic. In terms of storage, the OnePlus comes with 128GB or 256GB and the Xiaomi 256GB as well. In terms of battery size, OnePlus is rocking a 4500 mAh battery, whereas Xiaomi is going with a 5000 mAh battery. Now, one of the ways they've been able to actually achieve a 5000 mAh battery is they're using a completely different type of battery technology, which is kind of a risk. They're not using lithium ion, which every other phone manufacturer uses. I think it's like a silicon oxygen or something like that. It's quite cool. So we'll have to wait and see how that fares, but the whole thing with this technology is that it packs more battery into a smaller space, so you can increase the amount of battery that you can provide. In terms of display size, the OnePlus 9 Pro is rocking a 6.8-inch screen, whilst the Xiaomi is rocking a 6.81-inch screen. In terms of screen size, the OnePlus is rocking a 6.7-inch screen, whilst the Xiaomi is rocking a 6.81-inch screen, so not really too much of a difference. Both phones 8GB RAM or 12GB RAM options, I'm pretty sure. Both phones have the on-screen fingerprint scanner, fantastic, big fan of those. Both fingerprint scanners are optical, so they're a bit faster than the ultrasonic but slightly less secure. Now, both phones do have quick charging. OnePlus is using 65-watt wired charging and 50-watt wireless charging, which for like a week was a super fast speed everyone was really impressed with, the 50-watt wireless charging, up until Xiaomi came out with the Mi 11 Ultra and they were featuring 67-watt wired charging and 67-watt wireless charging. So that's symmetrical wired wireless charging, which is pretty cool at that kind of speed. So yeah, the Xiaomi wins in that category, right? We've got an extra 2 watts on the wired, but the wireless seems to be much faster. Now, one thing that's interesting is the previous generation Xiaomi Mi 10 Ultra, I believe, actually featured 120 watts wired charging, which is just a ridiculous charging speed. However, they've reeled it back for this launch, and I originally thought maybe they had some issues with the batteries going dead a bit faster because obviously it's putting a lot of strain on them, but the way they increase the charging speeds from 30 watts to 60 watts, for example, is by splitting the battery into 2 different compartments and charging them individually. So if you split those 2 compartments into 4 compartments, you can charge again faster up to 120 watts. But it seems like Xiaomi's gone with the new technology version instead of just continuously dividing the battery, which I'm pretty excited for. It's revolutionary, something that we used to see from OnePlus a bit more often. Both phones are rocking Android 11 and have dual SIM. In terms of UI, we have Oxygen OS on the OnePlus 9 Pro and MIUI UI on the Xiaomi. In terms of the experiences, both of these phones have really positive reviews in terms of the software experience. Both of them are relatively bloat-free, although Xiaomi does tend to come with a bit more software included, like eBay, Amazon, stuff like that, which really we shouldn't be getting with a flagship. We should be able to choose our own stuff. The OnePlus 9 Pro already came out on March 23rd, whereas the Mi 11 Ultra we're expecting to drop on the 23rd of April. Now, all of these phones support 5G, 4G, 3G, and 2G, just being with the Qualcomm processor, including the 5G software. Obviously, you might not get to use 5G anytime soon, though. Both feature USB Type-C, but no headphone jack. We still miss it. Both have good loudspeakers, but the Xiaomi loudspeaker is like a Harman Kardon one, you know, that fancy designer label, so they kind of tune it for the phone, and I've heard really good reviews from it, and it's supposed to be one of the loudest ones on the market. And there's a lot of stuff about the Xiaomi that's supposed to be the biggest, the best, the loudest. Like, they've got the fastest wireless charging, they've got the largest camera sensor in any smartphone supposedly, they've got the widest ultra wide camera, and they've got the biggest camera bump. So I think it's really interesting that they're doing this year what OnePlus was doing 2 years ago with the OnePlus 7 Pro. Graphics, Adreno 666 in both phones, again, pretty much symmetrical in terms of that sort of thing. Both phones are a very similar size, but the OnePlus 9 Pro is only about 190 grams, whereas the Xiaomi is actually more around 230, 240 grams with a case, so it's actually quite heavy. You will notice some of that weight is in the top of the phone, which is going to be slightly uncomfortable because of the camera bump, but you are getting a pretty kick-ass camera for that. Both phones feature AMOLED displays, but the OnePlus display is fluid AMOLED, so that's pretty cool. Both have a 20:9 aspect ratio, so what we're used to. Both phones have a hole punch display, which I'm not mad at, but I'm still using a OnePlus 7 Pro and it has the pop-up camera, and honestly I've never had any problems with it. It never gets greasy, it doesn't take up any screen real estate, and I really wish that phone manufacturers had kept to using that up until under-screen cameras with a screen going over the top of it. Technology was perfected, personally, because it's really handy. Both have really high PPIs, both have great Gorilla Glass, and both have 120Hz refresh rate, so really nothing to wish for there. I feel like that is pretty much everything in terms of the basic specs, so why don't we get into the deeper dive of this. So OnePlus's big deal that they've done this year is with Hasselblad. So this is a camera manufacturer, and It's a bit confusing because you would think, oh, they're working with a well-renowned camera manufacturer, they would be using their sensors in their phone, like a camera sensor from a high-end brand. But they're not. They're using a Sony sensor, and it's a great sensor, but they're using Hasselblad for their color processing. So I've seen some mixed reviews about this, people saying it is processed kind of differently, but mostly it kind of just looks flat and desaturated. It's not designer or fancy or anything like that. It's not bad, but it's also overhyped from the sounds of things. It seems like another excuse for OnePlus to sort of bump the price of the phones up, which is something we are seeing year on year with OnePlus. Now the cameras both have very, very similar performance. I can't really speak negatively on either of them. OnePlus is using some pretty cool technology on their ultra wide, which means that it's not blurring on the edges, but this is something that you can fix kind of in software. So it's a cool feature to have, but I wouldn't say it's a deal breaker. Also, bear in mind, OnePlus phones have never been known to be that good on their ultra wide, so hopefully this year it is a bit better, but in the past they've kind of been a bit basic with their ultra wides. Xiaomi, on the other hand, seems to have a relatively good ultra wide, although probably not as sharp on the edges as OnePlus. But OnePlus uses quite aggressive sharpening technology on their images, which can sometimes look a bit too much, whereas on the Xiaomi it's going to be a bit softer around the edges. The really special thing about the Xiaomi is the size of the sensor. They're using a pretty cool sensor. It's big, and in this kind of thing, size does matter, right? The bigger the sensor on the camera, the more light can come through, which means you can use shorter shutter times that you would need to take in comparison to a smaller sensor. And shorter shutter times means sharper images, because the longer the shutter is open for, the more chance of wobble from your hand holding the phone. So this is fantastic. I think I've been looking for so long. I know a lot of tech people have been saying we want a higher megapixel, but for me personally, I'm just all about sensor size. The bigger the sensor size, I wouldn't even care if it was a 12 megapixel sensor, like a Sony A7S, which is an incredible camera and video camera, is only 12 megapixel. That's all we need realistically. I don't need 150 megapixel if the image is going to be all noisy and horrible and grainy. In terms of which phone I would choose, personally, I'm going more towards the Xiaomi at the moment. I was really hyped for the OnePlus. I was really excited, but I just felt a little bit let down by the video, the launch video. They hyped up the Hasselblad collaboration just a bit too much and the reviews didn't really back it up. Whereas the Xiaomi phone, it looks like they're really trying to get me to purchase. OnePlus is kind of like, we know you're going to purchase because you know our brand and you're comfortable, right? Whereas Xiaomi's like, we're going to give you 67 watt wireless charging, 67 watt wired charging. We're going to give you some big ass dramatic camera bump. We're going to give you the biggest sensor, the widest wide angle. This stuff excites me. And for me personally, this is what excites me about smartphones. It's who's willing to push the boundaries the most and create the coolest devices. And I didn't feel as inspired by OnePlus this year in doing this, or last year actually with the OnePlus 8 Pro and the OnePlus 8T. I didn't really feel like I needed to go out and buy them. So I'm definitely excited to see what happens with the Xiaomi. You can let me know what you think down below. If you enjoyed the video, definitely consider subscribing and smash the like button if you do want to see more tech videos. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye.